Yes, I mean, I guess this is going to be one of the, how should I call it, the obnoxious genre of podcast episodes where podcasters talk about podcasting.
Meta podcasting.
What a fitting guest. Thank you for joining me. But I mean, I think I'll just start right out and say kind of why we're doing this, because the straight reason is that so this podcast is going to have quite a change. I think by the time this will come out, this will be the 119th episode, something like that, of remote audio interviews, and that is going to change. So after this episode, all of my interviews are going to be, well, still with sound, but video will also be recorded. So it'll be a video podcast in which I will interview people in person with video. The format is still going to be largely the same. It's still going to be a mixture of science and, behind the scenes, that's the phrase, of what it's like to do science and how it can be proven, that kind of stuff. But anyway, so it's going to be, maybe for the listeners, it's not going to be that much of a change. I don't know, because I'm still assuming most people will listen to it rather than watch it. But for me, it's going to be a big change. So I thought it would be fun to have a discussion now that it's also nearing the 5-year anniversary of the podcast, about podcasting, about, why we both started ours and how it changed over time and all that kind of stuff.
Looking forward to it, and congrats for getting over 100 episodes. That's a massive achievement, and really looking forward to the new format of the podcast. So I'm very keen to learn a bit more about that.
Yeah, it's fun. I guess this is probably the case in most kind of these. I wouldn't exactly call it creative endeavor, but these like where you produce something yourself, where, in the beginning it feels like you're putting in all this effort, and then you're like at episode 4, and suddenly then you're like, oh wait, I have 110 episodes.
It goes so quick.
Yeah. It's nice to finally be on the quick side of that, and not on the sludging to get another half episode out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought to kick off this conversation about podcasts, I'm just curious. So, I mean, you've, been on my podcast before, and we talked a little bit about this stuff, but I don't think we really talked about why you started yours and all that kind of stuff. So, why did you?
Our podcast started about 10 years ago, and this was back in the day where Skype was a thing. And I am doing this podcast with James Heathers, who I first met because we were thrown in together into an office doing our PhDs. And we both had finished our PhDs. I went to Oslo, he went to Boston, and we had just continued chatting. We were chatting over Slack. We had Skypes here and there. And then I thought to myself, why don't we record this and try a podcast? Back then, there weren't that many science podcasts happening at all, really. And I thought we can give this a go. Maybe someone will appreciate listening to us talk. Even if they didn't, we'd still have a lot of fun doing it anyway. And so we initially thought we would do a psychophysiology podcast, which was why we chose the name. This is the name of one of James's papers talking about some of the limitations of heart rate variability research, and one of the metrics we use, or one of the measurements we use, is Hertz. Therefore, everything hurts. But then after a couple of episodes, we decided maybe that's a little bit boring, and we started talking about different topics, and then just kind of went from there. So it initially started just as an excuse to catch up with a friend, and we're about to crack 200 episodes. So I think we're up to 180 something, and that is still the podcast. It is still me just catching up with a friend, and we are recording it and just going from there. So that was the initial motivation, and it still is the initial motivation. But I guess a couple of episodes in, kind of around episode 10, 20, we noticed that a lot of people started giving us feedback going, wow, I've never heard this stuff before. Because a lot of the stuff we were talking about was the behind the scenes of science, how science is actually done. And a lot of people are very lucky to be part of very active labs or very active departments where this stuff is spoken about explicitly, how publication really works. the incentive systems within academia. But these were things that we were talking about. And a lot of people were like, I have not heard these things, and these are the first times I've heard about these things. And getting that sort of feedback and talking more about these issues has been one of the big motivators for us, because we've been very lucky to be part of these conversations about how these things work. But a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are academically isolated, even if they're part of a very big university or a big department or even a big lab. They still feel very, very isolated. So this has been a very big part of why we've done it and why we continue doing it. That's been great, getting that sort of feedback from listeners over the years.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, it's also funny because to some extent, this is, in a way, I was almost on the flip side of that.
Okay.
Because, I mean, for me, it was also part of the coincidence that, my PhD started and then a year later, there was a pandemic.
Yeah.
And then our lab also moved. So, basically, for, the middle part of my PhD, I saw, 3 people. And I guess for me, it was almost the flip side of being I'm not seeing any of this, and I want to meet more people and connect with them and find out why they did X or Y in that paper, which is also why in the beginning some of the podcasts were a bit nitpicky, and I've slightly gone away from some of those very precise questions that bored me even during the editing. But yeah, it's funny for me. I know, in a sense, the motivation for why you keep doing it and why I started mine was probably to some extent somewhat similar in this. The recognition that there's lots of things that are, even though they're not explicitly hidden, they're just, there's not really I guess it's this classic thing, right? In a paper, you want a quick summary of what people found out and how they did it, right?
Yeah.
There's not really much room for this whole behind the scenes kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess for me was also partly finding out about interesting things from a scientific perspective, but then also getting that behind the scenes look, and then, because I can just record it, sharing it also with other people.
And it's so cool that you're changing this format, because this is something I've been thinking about as well. We have done this. We have done a few video episodes of Everything Hertz. We even tried doing a few live ones. That was a lot of fun because you just have no idea what's going to happen. We even managed to integrate live questions as well. So it was tricky though. It was quite stressful actually doing the podcast, but also producing the podcast live at the same time. Yeah. Now there are platforms like Riverside, and you're using Squadcast?
This is Squadcast, yeah.
Yeah. And with these sort of platforms, it is actually possible to have a producer that's also sort of jumping in and helping out and doing stuff. But this was all me on a laptop with just wires and gear going everywhere. It was a lot of fun, but it was pretty crazy. I like this idea of doing video stuff because I think a lot of people are accessing it. It's crazy to hear the amount of people that listen to podcasts via YouTube. This is something which I would never do, and I know a lot of people listen to music via YouTube as well, which I think is quite strange, but a lot of people do it. And a lot of people are listening to podcasts on YouTube, and this isn't even necessarily video podcast. It might just be somebody who's uploaded a video or just an audio file and have a static image, and people are listening to stuff this way. And I think video is very interesting because a lot of the ways that we record podcasts, particularly online, you're doing it via video. And it's great to see that you're doing it, but you're taking the approach where you're doing it in person. That is a lot more work than actually recording it online. How come you've gone for this in-person route instead of doing the more kind of online approach?
I mean, so first a quick comment on what you said. One thing I found funny is that, so since beginning of last year or this year, I can't remember, YouTube automatically allows for RSS feeds.
Yes.
So you can automatically upload my podcast to YouTube. I don't do anything for it. It just happens when I publish my normal episodes. And it is funny that, I assume no one would ever listen to them because it's just an image. It's just the logo of the podcast and then a 2-hour conversation. And so for me, it was more YouTube being one of the biggest or second largest search engine, that kind of thing. And why not? funny enough, I do have one episode that is also my least scientific one with the biographer of Vladimir Nabokov, Brian Boyd. That one actually has something like 500 views on YouTube now or something like that.
Yeah, but
10% of which actually listen to the entire thing.
It's incredible, and it's purely it's the algorithm. So I think in many ways these algorithms suck. That is the downfall of Twitter. I'll not call it X. I'll call it Twitter. But for things like YouTube and also to a degree Spotify, these work incredible because somebody out there has a very niche interest, and these algorithms can bring the person that's making stuff like a podcast on a very specific episode with someone out there in the world who is very interested, and they might not even be interested in the sort of theme of your entire podcast, but that specific episode, their algorithm, bam, they listen to it and they're listening to the whole thing. So that is why stuff like YouTube is very interesting, because one of the problems with podcasts, which I'm sure you know, is the problem of discovery. How are people going to find what you're talking about? Traditionally, the way that we would do it is either word of mouth or social media. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that was Twitter. We had many scientists using Twitter, and it was very easy to focus on that platform and promote your podcast that way. But now things have fragmented a lot. Of course, a lot of scientists have moved to Blue Sky, and surprisingly, LinkedIn is going really well. Like, I never would have seen the day, but like, I'm almost getting like more engagement and responses on my LinkedIn posts than
you're
Blue
actually
Sky.
posting there? Okay.
It's
I don't
crazy.
know. I'm on Reddit sometimes. I mean, I don't have an account, but I'm on the, user list on the web on the front page, and sometimes it shows LinkedIn lunatics, and so it's just people posting the dumbest stuff on LinkedIn. So that's the only context I have on LinkedIn these days.
I mean, it's so weird. Like, I feel like somebody there is just tweaking the dials on you seeing really weird lunatic LinkedIn stuff versus normal LinkedIn. And some days I'm like, this is okay. This platform is totally fine. Other days I'm like, yep, now we're seeing the weird LinkedIn stuff. But the days that they tweak the algorithm and it's good, it's actually quite good. But what's interesting is the level of engagement that you get on LinkedIn is just seems to be quite high. Again, it's the algorithm, and the tail is very, very long. On Blue Sky, if no one's seeing your post within a day, it's never going to be seen. On LinkedIn, you're getting stuff, responded to like a month later because the algorithm sets just some people are logging in once a month. It works really, really well. So every now and then I do sort of social media talks for students in the faculty and just other workshops here and there. And it's weird now recommending LinkedIn. It just feels strange, but that's just where the data is. That's where there is right now, at least. It is on par with Blue Sky in terms of getting these sort of responses. So it's interesting. But all that to say, video is interesting. Why have you gone for the in-person rather than the online?
So it's funny. It's one of those things where you have like a couple of reasons that kind of interact with each other in weird ways. So one of the big problems of my podcast, right, is that, number one, it's completely self-funded, right? So I can't send my guests microphones for their interviews. And I mean, I could, but then I couldn't eat. And
that's important. You need to eat.
And I have clear preferences here. No, but the problem is basically that the thing that always annoyed me is that, like, you start this podcast, and then my first episode has terrible audio on my part, and it gets better. You get better equipment at some point. You have pretty decent sound on your part. But the problem is, when my guest comes, I have no idea what the sound is going to be like. Yeah. And it is generally improving because laptops are getting much better than they were even 5 years ago. Especially because, 5 years ago, people had laptops that were maybe 3 years old. But if people now get a new laptop, it's often quite good. But nonetheless, and there's no way to predict what it's going to be like for me, for my guests. Usually I assume younger people are better, but I've had some young people with just like, oh, I needed headphones and, blah, blah, blah. And so the initial problem with my podcast is basically that I don't speak much on my podcast, but I have usually much better sound than my guests. And that annoys me to no end.
Yes.
And so one thought I had was like, well, why don't, if it's a bit of a crazy idea, but why don't I travel to people? Because another thing that I always found annoying is that often I have very nice conversations with people. We talk for 60 to 120 minutes, and sometimes, a bit before and after or whatever. And it's often just this annoying thing where you talk to someone in a nice conversation, and then at the end just go like, okay, well, bye. And then you press end conversation, and then you're just, back in your living room, right? I mean, it's in a way, it's of course the magic of actual magic of technology, right? In that sense that I can talk to, Brian Boyd, the guy he's in New Zealand, right? We can talk, and I was slightly tired because it was like 7 a.m. But we can talk over thousands of kilometers and blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, it's also kind of annoying if you have a nice conversation with someone that then, there is still this disconnect between meeting someone in person and online. And so then I just initially had this idea of, okay, like I want to do in-person interviews. And again, during my PhD, that wasn't really possible because of the pandemic and because no one was really where I was in that sense. But it's kind of been this thing I've had in the back of my mind. And the second thing is also, as you mentioned, the discoverability of podcast things. And this is, I think, a much bigger factor for me than, for example, for you, because I don't really do social media. When I started this podcast, I think I technically had an Instagram account, and I think that was it. I might have had a silent follow 5 people on Twitter account, but that was about it. And I don't like social media. I don't really use it. To this day, I have very stereotypical, non-inspiring posts whenever I have an episode. And, it's an annoying thing. On Twitter, I started getting some following, right? It grows slowly but exponentially, and then it just falls off, right? Because of the Twitter situation. And so on Blue Sky, it's the same thing. But yeah, basically the problem for me is just that even though I have a very niche podcast, I feel like, in that sense, where I ask some pretty specific questions, I still want people to listen.
Yeah.
And the problem is just that if you don't use social media and you're not famous in other ways, or you have an established lab or something like that. Also, none of my supervisors have ever really had social media. It's genuinely I've just been in this social media hole my entire academic career. So anyway, so those were 2 thoughts I had. And then, the obvious question is, why don't I just try? Why don't I try to, I want to do in person anyway. Video helps supposedly with discoverability. So why not just do that? The other thing is, I think, how should I put it? I just don't like. So I sometimes watch interviews on YouTube, but I just don't. I never watch one where it's just 2 people on. Now, what we have a split screen, and then they're in separate places, and you have this flat image from a webcam and that kind of stuff, right? I just don't like that. So that was never really an option. It was basically either video in person or not. And actually, initially, I also thought I was not going to do video, but still be in person.
Okay.
Just because of the stress and cost associated with buying cameras and then having to deal with another dimension to your whole recording. But then I thought that's stupid. If I have all this stuff, I might as well just add video to it. So yeah, it's again, as I said, it's not really a specific reason. It's just this convolution of things. And I mean, now also a bit by coincidence, although I think I would have done it anyway, Zurich, where I'm right now for my postdocs, actually a lot of people come through who I want to interview, and partly at our institute, but also in Zurich General.
Okay.
And so that allows me to, I'm hoping, interview 10, 15 people a year just by being here. And
that's really good.
Yeah, I'm still surprised how Zurich has a way outside pool, also in art and it's music and that kind of stuff. It's surprising.
Yeah.
For a city of 500,000 people or something, it has I like classical music. It's crazy who comes here. Anyway, so that's that. And then basically the plan is to take 1 or 2 trips for 2 to 3 weeks total, where I just go to a place and interview a bunch of people.
Just around Europe?
Yeah, I mean, initially I thought, so initially Europe, in principle, I mean, obviously, so I'm obviously limited by finances,
Yeah.
mainly. So I would have to go to a place where there's lots of people. So a place like Boston is obviously a great place for me to interview people. Quite frankly, right now, I don't know whether I want to travel to the US with a suitcase full of cameras and microphones.
Yeah, I get that.
I'm not entirely sure I'm going to come back with my equipment or be able to do any of the interviews. But I mean, for now, I've got plenty of people I want to interview in Europe. So
Yeah.
I mean, actually, one final thing like here is that about the Europe thing is that I feel like also the general landscape is pretty US heavy. For often language reasons, but also other reasons.
Yeah.
So I think actually interviewing people in Europe is actually a bit of a niche that I think is probably slightly underdeveloped.
Oh, for sure.
Compared to me going to Harvard and MIT and interviewing people there.
Yeah. That's exciting. When are you going to start?
Well, I wanted to start a long time ago, but I'm very lazy. No, so basically, so now it's end of August, so mid-September, hopefully. It depends a little bit on, so I haven't really planned this yet much. So we'll see when the first episode comes out. I mean, I have people I want to ask, but I haven't done that yet. Still have to buy some cameras. But yeah, the plan is to start in a couple of weeks to a month, something like that, and then release from October.
I think conferences could be good for that as well, because a lot of people are in one space.
Yeah, I'm wondering, so that's something where I've gone back and forth. Part of me thinks that's a good place to do it. Part of me thinks it's a bad place to do it because everyone's there to like catch up with people they haven't seen in a long time and they don't really have time. And
yeah,
I don't know, part of me thinks like, I'll just be there and just kind of be a nuisance.
Yeah, it's something I thought about as well. Like I've got a conference coming up and I'm like, do I bring my gear? And because this one is a much, much smaller conference, it's not one of these big mega conferences, I also had the same sort of thought, would I just be a nuisance? But I think at the same time, it doesn't necessarily have to be long, these sort of things. It could even just be a short 20-minute conversation somewhere in the corner of a bar. I mean, the sound might not be great, but at least, I think a lot of people have a lot of grace for worse audio, depending on the context. But yeah. I think that's an idea. As for gear, something I've been playing with is just doing more recordings and more video recordings, and I found simply modern smartphones are good enough. I think, at least. So if you have a modern smartphone and something like we're getting very technical here, but something like one of the Rode wireless transmitters, where you can basically get a transmitter, put it inside a microphone, and then that transmits straight to the phone. And so you have your audio video straight in your phone, and the audio comes from these pretty high quality microphones as well. That's just a thought, but that's something that I've been playing around with, and I always like looking at new bits of gear and bits of technology and how to do these kind of things a bit better.
So this is still a big decision I have to make, and I'm going back and forth on this. So one background thing is I take photos. So for me, the idea of using my phone for something is just sacrilegious.
Yeah.
However, so that's why initially I started off being like, I'm going to buy proper cameras and whatever. Then a couple of months ago, I realized like especially if I'm traveling, mobile phone is absolute perfect.
Yeah.
Because I have the camera, I have great battery.
Yeah.
Right? Any other camera, you need like an external battery or something like that. You have storage. You don't have to think about that. You can, get an iPhone with a terabyte. They fit, I can have one in my right pocket, one in my left pocket. Yep. I'm kind of done. I need a tripod. But basically, I could basically travel with two tripods tripod in each of my hand. And that could kind of be it. So that's what I thought until a couple of weeks ago, and then for the last couple of weeks, I've been thinking, well, if I'm spending that much money, because I would want to buy like one of the best phones right now, right? I might as well just spend like a couple of $100 more and get some actually good cameras. I don't know. It's really tricky to me because so there's also two separate aspects to video quality, right? One is the so the phones I actually bought the new iPhone 16 Pro Max, whatever it is. It's very good. I tried it. You just pointed at something and it looks pretty good already.
Yeah.
So the kind of automatic features you have in there, because the image quality in the phone is good because of the computational power,
yes,
not because of the camera. And so that's amazing. On the other hand, I think if you know what you're doing, you can probably get much nicer image, out of camera that's optimized for sure. That. So I'm going back and forth on it. Thing is, I also have tripods that are big enough to carry a proper camera and that kind of stuff. So it's a bit of a... So the microphone's already bought with all the XLR cables and the blah, blah, blah. And I recorded one episode already with it.
Great.
But only audio. That was great. First in-person interview. And luckily that confirmed my suspicion that it was going to be more fun to do an in-person interview.
For sure.
I'm glad I didn't hate it.
It's so much better. I think we've done like maybe, I think only 2 or 3 in person. One was a live recording in Frankfurt that we did. And we had a guest there, and that was live, and that was a lot of fun. And then I think we did a second one in Frankfurt as well. And then we did a semi-live one where I was traveling through Australia, and I was with the guest in person, and then James joined us online. And there's just nothing like it. It's just, It's so much better doing it in person. I think online's great because of the convenience, especially if your guest is from New Zealand. But doing it in person is a lot better if possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so for me, I think it was maybe a little bit unrepresentative. So the interview I did was with Elsa Fouragnon, who I liked a lot just as a person. She was at the Institute and visited, and she was a lot of fun. I think she does really interesting stuff. And then we started the interview talking about how she grew up in French Polynesia.
Oh, wow.
So it's, I'm not sure this is the most representative episode of what it's like to be in person. And I've got on fine with all my guests, but there have definitely been some interviews where I'm not sure what, that's probably going to be a bit less fun in person. But it's so far it's been great. But the camera thing is, right now I'm tending again towards saying, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. Yeah. But here's the other thing, right? The financial investment. So I don't have kids or family. Let's just say that. And I don't plan to. And the financial investment, let's say I buy like a really nice camera with a good, or like a good camera with a good lens and that kind of stuff. It's going to cost me maybe 3,000 euros per camera. That would be a really nice camera, right? That is a lot of money, but also relative to the time I put into it, the investment is big on the time side than on me spending 6,000-7,000 euros. That's going to last me a couple of years, or 5 to 10 years, or however long, right? Like, I don't know. So part of me also, so I'm also thinking just spend the proper money, then you have the proper equipment, and then you don't have to think about it. And,
exactly.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm stuck with a couple of iPhones that are not going to be serviced in 5 years anymore. Yeah. So we'll see. But no, I definitely agree that cameras are, for the most part, good enough. And if I was starting out today, I would do that. But I also know that I've done 119 episodes now, so I can roughly estimate whether I'm going to stick with it or not.
Yeah. I think you know by now.
Yeah, I'm gonna, I don't know how long I'm going to keep doing this, and I can't do it at the pace that I did, especially the first 2 years, let's say, where I did almost an episode a week. But I'm going to do this for another 2-3 years at least. So why not just invest?
Why not? Put it all in there.
I don't have kids that are going to starve, so... Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, I have to make that decision pretty quickly, or like within the next 2 weeks, let's say. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, just briefly, whilst we're on the equipment side, we mentioned this before we started recording. The one thing that's really changed in the 5 years that I've been doing the podcast, and presumably even more so in the time that you've been doing it, is the quality of inbuilt laptop microphones, and cameras for that effect too. But the microphones, it's astonishing. I mean, I have the, what is it called? The Shure SMB7 or whatever it is, the nice microphones. I bought those, and I used them for some of my episodes. And then I at one point had some sort of internet problem. I don't know exactly what it was. For some reason, it didn't work with the microphone remotely. So I used my laptop microphone, and I was like, this is fine.
They're getting so much better.
Yeah, and I'm using this as my MacBook Pro microphone. I mean, I've made sure the room is slightly better than it could be or would be naturally. But I'm on holiday now. I'm basically just using my laptop, and quite frankly, I think if people want to start a podcast now, if it's remote, you just need a laptop.
Yeah. I think they're getting much better to that point now, whereas you couldn't say that 5-10 years ago.
No, I mean, especially my first episode has terrible audio quality because I had to be in a room with, I didn't realize at the time, terrible audio. But I had an external microphone even at the time because my laptop was even worse and the quality of my first episode is terrible. So that, my microphone my laptop would have been absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, again, if you're in a really bad room, I think that's where these professional microphones can make all the difference.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're doing it at home in your bedroom, just use a laptop.
Yeah, for sure.
I have one question or one topic, unless there's something you still want to add to that.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So one big topic for me, which is going to be to some extent exacerbated now by me doing in-person video, is the time question. As I mentioned a bit before, that's the biggest investment. And I'm curious maybe a little bit first on what your situation is there, because, I was a PhD student, now I'm a postdoc. As I said, I don't have anyone I have to care for in that sense, or even pets or anything like that, right? So I can kind of, I do have a scientific career that I'm trying to get going.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I don't have a huge amount of time investment, so I can do this podcast.
Yeah.
But even then, I will say, if I took the time that I spent on the podcast and put it into my scientific work, I would be in a much better position. I think that's, at least short term, that's definitely the case. Long term, I don't think so, but short term, having a paper or two more at this stage of my career would make a difference. Anyway, so I'm curious because you have a different situation. You have some sort of responsibility, apparently. And, right now you could be spending time with your children, but you're talking to me instead.
Yeah.
It's a choice you made.
Well, no, they're preschool and school. So,
thank God. No, but my point is how are you thinking about the time it takes to do the podcast? It seems to me also you're doing fewer episodes now than you used to a couple of years ago.
That's right.
How are you thinking about that, Jan?
Yeah. So we used to do 2 episodes a month. I think there was a period we're doing even more than that, but at a minimum, we're always pushing for that. But then with family commitments and also with James's schedule, it just wasn't realistic enough to be able to do 2 episodes a month. It's not just the recording. The recording takes however long it takes, but it is also the editing, which also can take some time. But then other things like putting together the episode notes, posting online. We like to, so we have a more permanent record of our episodes. We post all our episodes on Open Science Framework as well. It's just duplicating the information that's on the website, but that still all takes a fair amount of time. So with that, we've pulled back to 1 episode a month because I think that's a little bit more realistic. But in terms of time, I still think it's absolutely worth it. 1, because again, it's just catching up with a friend. But 2, just to be able to have that opportunity to talk about these particular topics, I think is quite useful. So I think it's a worthwhile time investment doing that sort of stuff. I wish we could do it more, but just with life and with having 2 young kids, it's just not possible. I had so much more time, both for podcasting and also for work as well. But that's certainly changed, and this might change in sort of 5 to 10 years. But for now, this is what I'm doing, and it's totally fine. But it's just a slight change of priorities there.
I think actually, so one thing I've noticed is that I feel like, maybe I'm just imagining this, but I feel like also, so I don't know when exactly you made that adjustment to once a month, but I feel like the episodes are also getting better because of it, because it's a bit more like, to some extent, especially because, there's obviously lots and lots of stuff to talk about, right? But I feel like it's a bit more, a bit less, but a bit higher quality now that it's once a month. And now I actually listen, I think, I'm not just saying this because you're here, but I actually listen to every episode right now because it's like every once in a while it comes out and like, oh yeah, I'll listen to that. I haven't listened to it in a while.
Yeah.
And like every time I look forward to it, whereas if it's, every 2 weeks or even more, there's a bit of a like, oh, another episode I haven't listened to the previous one. And blah, blah, blah.
And I mean, people have long podcast queues. A lot of people just have a long list, and if you're doing it regularly, then stuff can fall behind. But then the ones that come once a month, it's coming, and here it is. And I guess, I mean, that there is always a lot of stuff happening in science, but if you're doing it once a month, you're more able to hit at, oh, this is the thing that everyone was talking about this particular month. So in terms of topics, maybe the topics have gotten better. I'm not sure, but it gives us more time and more options of things to talk about. It gives us more time to get questions from listeners as well. And then
it's also more things happen. I mean, I guess in the last episodes, it seems you've talked more about James's work than yours, for example.
Yes.
Like, because he had some news with the grant he got and that kind of stuff.
The medical evidence project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff where I also feel like, things just take time to progress. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So just having more time between episodes allows, it's a more of an interesting update because it's just more, I mean, I guess it's not been much of an update yet because it's all pretty new with that situation. But I find it really interesting because there's this like, for me, there's this big trade-off where I notice I have a very irregular posting schedule. I think I've published like one episode in the last 3 months, but I'll probably publish weekly for the next month or something like that.
Okay.
So I have this like very like sometimes weekly, sometimes not at all for 2 months kind of thing. But I also had a time when I published pretty regularly every 2 weeks kind of thing. And I noticed like if I publish weekly, it really leads to more downloads. Like it's a pretty clear, there seems to be some like super additive effect there.
Okay, that's interesting.
And I mean, maybe I've never done it consistently for more than like half a year. So, it's maybe at some point that falls off again. But I've just noticed like when I, you have the downloads for the episodes you publish and then the old stuff, right? And I just feel like all of this gets more when I publish weekly.
Okay.
And another thing that's good about doing more episodes is I noticed that, so after my PhD, I took a bit of time off and I did like 1 month where I recorded like 7 interviews, something like that, right? Again, I just took some time off. I think I once had 3 in like 2 days or something.
Wow.
Like that. And that's a bit, stressful because I prepare quite a bit for most episodes. But I also noticed I was just better at it, because I'm more in the, I don't know, maybe for you it's a little bit different because it's more talking about your actual work and stuff you're doing and thinking about. But for me, it's often, I'm kind of always diving into someone else's world with these interviews.
Yeah.
And that and conducting an interview by, having things you want to talk about but still listening to the person and, following their line of thought, and keeping it all constrained in time and these things is a skill that I feel like when I do an interview, again, the first time after 2 months, it takes me a bit to get back into it.
You get a bit rusty.
So it's this real trade-off where I'm, in a way, I want to do more episodes because it has all these benefits, but at the same time, it's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
I don't know whether, and so one way around that would be to batch them.
Yep.
In a way, right? To just say like, okay, I'm just gonna have 2-3 times a year when I record a lot of them, and then I release them all once a week, and then I have a summer break or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, you have to be organized for that. Let's start with that problem. But the other thing is obviously now that I do in person, that completely falls apart because people are here when they're here.
Yeah.
And sure, I still have this when I travel somewhere. I can do that. But yeah, I don't know. I think for me, the biggest problem is really this like time management thing because a podcast is as much time as you want to put into it.
Exactly.
And I feel like it's easy to put more and more into it, but and it feels like a bit of a waste of time, when you should want to be doing your own research, and then you spend 10 hours reading papers by someone else.
No, but I don't think it's lost time. I think especially if it is vaguely related to the work that you're doing, and you are talking to. I see so many instances of people like cold emailing some famous person, going, "Can I pick your brain over a Zoom for half an hour?" Of course, they don't have the time for this. Versus, can I interview you for my podcast people are like, yeah, like people love talking about their research. I think we've had like 80 plus guests, and I think of all that, only one person has said back to us, sorry, I don't have the time. But they were kind enough to go, but my colleague has a bit more time and can answer a lot of questions about what you want to talk about. People generally say yes to this kind of stuff. And
sorry, but that, as I don't want to push back, but that is an incredible, like I get I would say about half the people I contact respond.
Okay.
And about a third of the people actually do the interview, like in total. So what do you tell them? Do you send them pictures of
just
their children or something like that? Just like, you better do the interview? Or
I think some of it comes from, look, this could be a biased response rate, because some of this could be I interacted with this person on this topic on Blue Sky.
Okay, yeah.
And then they have that context there. Or it just could be that we might mention, we spoke with your colleague as well a couple of months ago, or this is something that our audience is interested in because of X, Y, Z. So there could be some biases there. And many of the people, I would say, we have some sort of interaction beforehand. Very few would be completely cold from memory. A lot of them would be because they wrote this interesting paper and we spoke to them online, so we just wanted to discuss more. So I guess that's a bit of that's a difference there.
And I guess one difference is also that your podcast is more focused in terms of theme to some extent, because I do computational neuroscience, social psychology, meta science, and random stuff. But yeah, actually one thing I wanted to say though is that if anyone wants to do an interview-based science podcast, I will still agree with the general point that this is probably one of the easiest groups of people to interview or to get to interview. Yeah. One downside is that they often, at least the people I've spoken to, often don't have that much public speaking experience. Yeah. Or being interviewed. Often they say, I'm the first person who's interviewed them.
Oh, wow.
And that has its own problems. Yeah. But one of the reasons why I was comfortable, again, I was a PhD student, right? Like I felt very uncomfortable asking people to interview them, right? Because it's just like, I feel like, especially in the beginning, when you have nothing to show, you're just wasting their time, right?
Yeah.
Like I have 2 episodes and 3 listeners. Yeah. Kind of interview, right?
It's starting off is hard.
Exactly. And so, but one reason that I always felt comfortable asking people whether I could interview them is because I have been, as probably most academics have, multiple times in my career, been at a talk somewhere where someone flew in or took a long train ride from another country to talk in front of 20 people, half of whom were only there to fill the room. And so I was like, okay, I think I can get 10 people. Yeah. I think I can get 10 people to listen to this.
Yeah.
So then basically what I mean is just basically academics are used to traveling for free to talk in front of basically no one. Yeah. And any podcast is going to be better than a lot of talks I've been to in person.
Yeah. I think that's certainly going to help. But all that to say, I don't think a lot of people look at these things under the broad umbrella of science communication, or of saying that like this, if it's not directly related to your work, this is a waste of time. But I think it can definitely inform your work. I have found out some of the coolest stuff that I've done, at least I think personally, has been from reading slightly outside my field. So, or going to talks slightly outside my field, because when you are totally in your field, everyone's reviewing each other's papers. Everyone's using the same sort of methodology as well. This is great. And no one is really spending time outside their field. But then if you hear talks or reading papers slightly outside your field, people are using very interesting methods that you could apply to your field. And when you start applying them to your field, people are like, wow, this is novel, this is new. And you're like, no, it's not. People have been doing this for a very, very long time. And I think that's the same for podcasts, because especially when you're doing guests and you're interviewing people, you're looking into their background, you are learning stuff which you could apply to your own work. You are meeting with people as well, and it's always good to grow your network that way too. So I don't think it is of course it is taking time, but I don't think it is a waste because it's not directly producing a paper, collecting data, writing up stuff. It complements that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's this. I think I mentioned this earlier, right? It's to me, this is a long-term versus short-term kind of perspective because, I mean, again, each of my episodes is almost 90 minutes on average, right? And I've done more than 100, and editing takes more than it takes me to record the thing.
Of course,
preparation. So, if I'm being very modest, I've spent more than 1,000 hours on this podcast, right?
Yeah,
and that's a lot of time.
Yeah,
for the last 5 years, right? It's it's basically 45 minutes a day, every day for the last 5 years.
Yeah,
and I do know that, that's what I meant earlier. So, on a very short-term basis, I know I would have more papers if I didn't do the podcast.
Yeah.
But I also think, again, if you take a long-term perspective, I am meeting. I mean, well, okay, randomly we might have actually met because you started some sort of collaboration with my PhD supervisor, right?
Yes,
or something like that. So this is a bad example, but for 90% of my guests, I might not have met them ever in a couple of years afterwards, and especially because I also do interview people from outside of my field, and that's super cool. And but I think you do have to take a bit of a longer-term perspective. But one thing I'll add, which was kind of a cool thing that happened in the last couple of months, is that so again, one thing I've noticed is that there seems to be, at least for my podcast, there was a bit of an inflection point, I think, in terms of people's perspective once I hit maybe 70, 80 episodes, something like that. I think before then it was always oh, okay, you have a podcast, whatever. But at some point, I think if you have enough episodes, people are oh, this is an actual thing.
Yeah.
This isn't just you doing 5 episodes and stopping. Yeah. And I think it was really after around that time that I think people's response when they found out I had a podcast got a lot more positive than it was before.
Yeah.
And the best example of that, I think, is that so I've been, applying for fellowships and that kind of stuff. And I can't remember which one it was. It was one of the ones I didn't get. But both reviewers commented positively on my podcast.
Wow.
And I mentioned it in my CV, right? It's not they both just knew it, right?
Yeah.
But it's still the kind of thing where they both said oh, this is a really impressive thing and whatever. So I feel it's starting to actually have some direct benefits.
It's super positive. I mention it in all my grant applications when it comes to science communication. Anyone can say in response to a job advertisement or a grant application, these are the things I'm going to do. But very few people can say, this is what I have been doing and what I'm going to continue on doing as well. And job applications and grant applications and fellowship applications are ridiculously competitive. Anything that you can do to get that 1% edge, looking into applications, everyone has, comparable amounts of publications. Well, some don't, but this is the one thing which can really differentiate you from other people. So I think it's a positive thing in that way as well. It's certainly been positive for my career, being able to say, yeah, this is what I've done, and this is one way to communicate research. So that's been really good.
Do you actually consider one thing I had, so the question was whether you consider your science communication, or how you actually think about it, because for me, so science communication for me is usually, I interpret that as meaning to the general public.
Yeah.
But that's not at all what I do. Mine is very much for scientists.
Yeah.
And for example, my mum has a PhD in toxicology, and she listened to 2 episodes. I have no idea what you're talking about. It's not just for a scientifically literate audience. It's specifically for people in my field and adjacent fields, right? Which has pros and cons, but it's just I have little interest in using new metaphors to tell people what a neuron is. But am I correct in assuming that's also the case for you, or does yours go a bit broader than that?
I would say it's a bit more broader, because a lot of the stuff we talk about are just issues across science. Of course, sometimes we'll get a little bit more specific about particular papers, but I guess there is that focus on the biomedical sciences, particularly psychology, because that's our background. But I would say it's a little bit more broader. And while most of our audience would be scientists, quite a lot aren't. They're just people who are interested in science and have a decent knowledge, a decent working knowledge of how science works. So yeah, I mean, it's very hard to say what constitutes science communication, but I think ours, just by virtue of the topic that we have, is a little bit more broader. It's a pretty wide audience.
Yeah. So here's a question. So this is a question for my podcast that I've been wrangling with since before episode 1, right? Which is name and logo.
Yeah.
And in my case, I know that I have a terrible name for my podcast. It's my initials, and I know it's a terrible name because literally people I worked with in the lab were like, "What's your podcast called again?" I was like, "It's my initials. You know me. How have you forgotten them?" So I know I have a very non-memorable name.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sayable, but it's not memorable.
Yeah.
My logo is, I'll be, not to pat myself too much on the back, but I believe I started before Charlie XXX's Brat campaign. I believe I already had the logo. They stole it from me. They did it to be intentionally ugly. I did it because I thought, why not?
Yeah.
It's a slightly different motivation behind it. It was funny seeing that in lots of places. You're like, that's my podcast logo.
Yeah, they've taken it.
But yeah, so one question in a way I have where I just basically, should I change the name or not? And should I change the logo or not? Because right now I have a name that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's completely non-descriptive. It's not memorable. And that probably doesn't help. But I also wonder actually whether it makes any difference. Because I often don't know what podcasts are called that I listen to. I just know it's that whatever podcast I find it, and then
it's the logo because you look. I mean, yours is very distinct with that.
It's distinct. That was what I tried to do exactly.
I mean, if you are going to change it, I reckon now would be the time.
Exactly, that's what I'm asking.
But I'm not sure about the value of that. I don't think it plays that much of a big role. Names are weird when you think about band names. A lot of the popular bands, like Pearl Jam. What kind of a name is that? But it's Soundgarden. Look, I'm showing my age by mentioning 90s grunge bands, but names are so strange. And it's not the name.
I've heard of those names.
What was that?
I've heard of those bands.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that I can tell you what they do, but
people have heard of it. The power isn't in the name. It's in the podcast. I just don't think it makes that much of a difference. Like if you had a very specific topic that you were talking about, then maybe it could be something around that topic. But I don't think it makes that much of a difference. So yeah, I mean maybe, but like if you're gonna do it now. But I don't I don't think it's because like you said, like sometimes you just look on your phone in your podcast app and you see the logo, you're like, that's it. That's the podcast. And given that so much discovery is about algorithm rather than people actually searching, like do people actually Google like neuroscience podcasts? I don't know. So much of it just comes from just word of mouth and social media and that kind of thing. So yeah, as for names, I don't think it's that important.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, like, the reason why I haven't I've thought about this before, right? Whether I should change the name or not, and I could have changed it at any time. But you're right. Obviously, the reason I'm asking it in public now is because now is the time. But one reason is I just couldn't come up with a better name at the end of the day, because my podcast is getting more focused than it was in the beginning. In the beginning, I really wanted to have it be a bit of everything. Everything I'm interested in show, right? So the initial 50 episodes, I think, show that it's very wide. There's some literature, like book discussions. There's a bunch of different things in there. I've completely stopped doing that. And basically now I only do science interviews. So It is more specific. And, or sometimes I have like a random episode that isn't science, but 95% is. And, but I just don't know what else to call it, because like there's, the easy branding thing is like calling it the neuroeconomics podcast or whatever, which would be closer to what I do in research. But like most of my stuff is neuroeconomics, right, in the podcast. So.
Plus, that would limit you if you were to call it that.
Exactly.
Then it limits you to those things, which might be good. But if you want to have a bit of flexibility,
it might have been smart to start that way and then broaden out the name. But I think having a broad name, then making it narrow, and then
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only genuinely good name I can think of, which is only a good name for because of the URL, is if I call it Ben Talks 2, then I could buy the Trinidad and Tobago domain of TO. Then I could call it bentalks.to.
I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all.
No, I like it, but then that's only for the URL.
Yeah.
It makes outside of that, but then also you only know it's a guy called Ben who talks to people. Again, it doesn't tell you anything else. It's more memorable.
Yeah, that's the thing. Maybe a name can help when it comes to memorability, but I'm not super convinced. It's just things get shared not because of cool names.
Yeah, that's my hope.
You'll find out.
And also, actually, fun thing about your podcast name, I'm not joking. I listened to more episodes than willing to admit before I realized that there was a pun in the name.
Yeah,
I didn't. I was just like, oh yeah, it's about Hertz, some measurement, science, whatever. I didn't. Yeah.
Not many people. I think we bring it up every now and then, the origin of the name, and sometimes people ask us, it's a paper based on a pun. So
yeah, exactly. But the pun completely eluded me.
Yeah.
For a long time. Anyway, maybe a very broad question. Do you have any final recommendations for me? I mean, so we've talked about in a couple of weeks I'm going to be doing my first video interviews. I still have to decide what equipment to buy. Probably sticking with the name. Everything seems uncertain right now.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, anything that we haven't covered that I should do, according to your opinion, or?
I think looking at one of the cool things with these online platforms like Descript and Riverside is that now it's very easy to take very small snippets from the episodes and to post those sort of things online. LinkedIn, for instance, or Blue Sky, or what have you. And because the amount of effort is so small, you may as well do it. Many people do not want to commit to listening to a long episode. Once you're into it, it's great. But then,
so snippet, you mean like the
15 seconds?
Or okay, really short. Okay,
15
not like
seconds.
5 minutes, but
No. Yeah. But just literally 15 seconds, because now the software is there to do it really quick for you. And because you are doing something unique, you're not doing the typical interview in a web browser, you're doing it in person. I think it's going to be really, really interesting to actually get those snippets and posting them. And because it doesn't take too much time, it's going to be worth the effort. And you're doing something which most podcasts aren't doing, which is that in-person video element. So I think that's really going to set things apart. And again, I think you're going to be really surprised by how well it goes on YouTube by posting these things, because not only do you have...
I fucking hope so.
Well,
I don't want to put all this effort and then nothing happens.
I absolutely think so, because of the algorithm there. And many people are just going to listen to the audio, but actually having some interesting video there is great. And this is something that I would love to do if I had a bit more time. Because at least with Everything Hertz, it's just not possible other than the once every couple of year in-person thing. But this is going to be... This is going to be a really cool experiment, and I'm really looking forward to seeing to seeing these episodes.
Yeah, I mean, one quick question on one quick comment also on video is like, one reason why I want to have YouTube is not because I think people actually listen to it per se, but because I discovered a lot of podcasts by watching 5-minute videos, excerpts on YouTube. So that's actually one of the main motivations for doing it. But is it actually that little time nowadays? Because like I remember I once or twice, I can't remember, tried to do like an audio excerpt.
Yeah.
It took me like half an hour.
It is.
Because you have to get one where actually it's in itself contained and makes sense.
Now on these, I don't know what it's like on Descript, but on Riverside, it automatically finds like 20 snippets, and of those, like 10 I could probably post. 5 are really good. And it gets a self-contained part, and you can say, if you remembered, there was a great conversation about scientific publishing, you could even put in, make a video about scientific publishing, and it finds that 30-second snippet, does it all for you. The subtitles are like 95% accurate, and the amount of time, doing this, I used to do this manually at the very beginning, and it took a lot of time. Yeah. Now it's done automatically. So it's so quick. It is It is so quick. It works really well.
Okay. I once had tried, but I have a bit of a lingering doubt because of that. But okay, I haven't looked at it in years. Yeah,
try again.
It was just I did it once. It was so much. I was like, this is not worth it. No one cared either.
It's so much quicker. Give it a go.
But yeah. Okay. Any final recommendations for people who want to start a podcast? I mean, I guess just give it a go.
Just be consistent and have a plan for at least 10, 20 episodes. Record them and release it, and just don't be obsessed with numbers, and make sure you're doing a topic which you actually like and you would still get benefit from, even if you had no listeners. I would still keep recording the podcast with James, even if we had like 10 listeners, because it's just us catching up, shooting the breeze, throwing ideas off one another. I would still do it. The fact that you have people listening, that's a bonus. So just be consistent. Just doesn't have to be with the same guest. I mean, I think the single host podcast is a very tricky genre to do, but doing it with a co-host or doing it with guests, I think, is a much better way. But picking topics and picking guests is stuff you genuinely want to do, and being consistent there, that would be the main thing. And don't worry about having that niche topic, because now it's becoming easier for people to find you, and it's much, much better to have 10, 20 people that are just really into what you're listening to than to have thousands of people who just sort of might listen to an episode here or there. The niches just run with it and don't worry about numbers. Yeah. And I guess I'd just add, don't be too embarrassed about inviting people to a podcast. They seem to generally ignore you or like it. Yeah, exactly. And also, again, equipment is not really a factor anymore that much. Not you can as much. Basically, do it for free if you have. I mean, you like many people will have a laptop from their work, which is a new laptop, and then you can probably do 90% of a professional show just with that. Yeah, it's the cost of entry is much lower. So I used to previously always recommend get a microphone, but now you may not even need to be able to do that. I mean, if you can, it's still better probably, but yeah. I think the beginner one that I would recommend is the Samsung 2QU. I think that's how it is. This is a nice microphone because it's got USB input, so you can plug it into anything. XLR cable, so you can also record audio that way, and it's got a headphone out, so you can monitor your audio. It's a nice. I think it's like 80 US or something. Yeah. So it's. I mean, it's not cheap, but it's. You can definitely, as you would know, spend a lot more money on microphones. But I think I want to see cables. I want to see more people doing this. I now teach a course in podcasting. Well, it is a course in scientific communication for masters and PhD students, and one of the seminars is a practical course on how to actually do this. We're very, very lucky at the university. We've got like a professional podcasting studio, which staff and students can book for free. And then the first part of the lesson is just learning how to use this stuff. And the second part is the students actually go in there and record their own thing. And they do amazing. I'm so impressed with the episodes. They get into groups of 3 and 4. I'm so impressed with the episodes that they come together. So it's so much fun being able to teach podcasting, science communication, because I think more people should do this sort of stuff. That's really interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah. There you go. There's your spin-off. Start to teach how to do this stuff. Yeah. It's a MLM scheme at the end of the day. You just need more people to do it. Do we still have time for recurring questions? We can do recurring questions. Okay. So I think I started about 10, 20 episodes after you appeared on the podcast. I had started recurring questions where I asked the same guests the same questions. The first, and so, let's catch up and do that now. So first is, what's a book or paper you think more people should read? It can basically be anything, old, new, famous, unknown. Can be related to what we talked about. Doesn't have to be, just anything you think people should pay more attention to. I got an older book, which was written in the late 70s, which is kind of related to what we're talking about. But this is called Laboratory Life, the Social Construction of Scientific Facts. Have you heard of this one?
Yes, I might have once even added it to my Amazon cart, but I haven't bought it or read it.
It's very good. So this is by Bruno Latour and Steve Woolnar. And this was one of those books that someone else was like, this book's very interesting. You should read it. And it is essentially a book describing two anthropologists visiting a lab in the 70s and describing how science is done. But they kind of play this role of the ignorant observer. So they know how science is done, even though it's a different research field. I especially like this book because it's about neuroendocrinology, which is my field of research. But I think even if you weren't into neuroendocrinology, if you were involved in the biomedical sciences, it is so interesting seeing an anthropologist looking at how science is done and how do we produce facts, and reading how this is done and seeing a complete outsider view go in there, because we do science because we're living in it and we're doing it, but they're actually looking at how these facts are produced and just observing that, yes, it seems to be that the main goal of these scientists is to produce papers, as if it's this sort of David Attenborough type character watching this
Right.
this newly discovered tribe.
Yeah.
But seeing how science is done, and I think especially within the biomedical sciences, we'd like to think that we are just out there discovering facts with this very dispassionate, we're very objective, but it really drives home the human element of what we do, and that there is human decisions going into what do we choose to investigate, how do we interpret our data, how do we choose how to publish this stuff, and seeing that from this perspective is very interesting. It's also very interesting to see that nothing's really changed. The technology that we used has changed. So the historical element is interesting because you just realize how much work went into doing all these sorts of things, where a lot of this work would now within wet labs be automated, but there was just armies of graduate students doing this kind of stuff. And that historical element is great, but you also learn that nothing has changed. And the incentives that we have within academia is just not a new phenomenon. Another related sort of side recommendation book is this biography of Ivan Pavlov by Daniel Todes, that's the name. And this is a monster of a book, and I cannot imagine how long it would have taken for this book to be researched, but it's talking about the life of Ivan Pavlov. As my research is in psychophysiology, this is also an interest of mine, but then reading about this, science has not changed. The incentive systems and the pettiness within academia, it's all there. It's all there. So I think it's good to read. I've been trying to read more about the history of science and the history of psychology, but Laboratory Life is a fantastic read just to see how we as scientists construct facts. And it's, so get it out of that cart and buy it, because it's a very,
Yeah.
I think it's also like online for free somewhere as well, for those that want to have a flick through. But I think, I personally like having the hard copy of things. So that's a book that I recommend.
But two quick asides here. Number one, I would pay good money for David Attenborough to go like,
That'd be amazing.
Look at the young man crying because his paper got rejected, and he now has to submit to a slightly worse journal. I would watch that. The other thing is, I also love these like encyclopedic biographies that kind of just give you such an insight into the entire time and place and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I'll say I'm going to check them out. You never know.
But Pavlov is a monster of a book. I've been reading it on and off for about 2 years because it's so big, and I'm sort of now he's almost about to retire. He had a long career, so he's almost about to retire. That's where I am in the book. But hearing about his early life and how he did science, and we kind of think, these Nobel Prize winners just work nonstop, and he did. But he also took a solid 2 months off every year. Yeah. So it's just hearing about that and the context of how science was done is very interesting. So sub recommendation, but only if you're up for reading monster biographies.
And one thing I add to that is that I recently listened audiobook to one of the big biographies, and I think that might actually be better because you can especially with lots of voice. So I listened to the one, The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt, which I think is also probably one of the great like encyclopedic biographies. It's like, I don't know, 30 hours of audiobook, and it ends when he's like 34 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And but listening to that was fantastic. So I don't know whether this one has an audiobook.
Yeah, I'm not
but
sure.
Sometimes I think this might be one of the best uses for audiobooks, I think.
Okay. Interesting.
In my
good
limited
recommendation
experience so far. Anyway, second recurrent question is something you wish you'd learned sooner. This can be from your work life and your private life, whatever you want. Just something, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think in terms of work, knowing how much potential overhead there is in the decisions that you make, because quite often people will go, are you interested in doing a book chapter? Are you interested in doing this sort of this thing? And the cost and the time isn't about just doing the thing itself, but it's also about the thing that's associated with that. So if you're doing like a book chapter, it's all the emails back and forth and the proofing and signing the forms and all this sort of stuff. I used to always forget that. And I'd see this thing come across my desk on my inbox and I'm like, that sounds great. And then as I'm doing it, I just forget. I'm like, oh man, there's so many emails back and forth. So just being more deliberate about those choices and realizing that and accounting that as well. And I think related to that, now I've kind of got like a hell yes rule when an invitation comes. Like unless it's a hell yes, I probably should say no, because it's not just about doing the task, but it's about that task being part of a wider to-do list as well. And there's a cognitive cost. I think I used to think, I'm so good at juggling all these things, but I'm not. And I think some people maybe can do it, but I'm simply not. Like I work best when I'm like, today I'm just focusing on this one paper, but being able to juggling 6 different things for me just doesn't work. So that overhead of doing tasks also is just another task to add to that sort of rotisserie of tasks there. So realizing that more, I think has been a lesson that I still have to learn because I'm still not great at that, but I'm learning it better.
Yeah, I've because I'm still more junior, I have more freedom, and but it still obviously creeps up, this kind of stuff. And recently, a couple of times, I will have like 5 days where I can just do one project.
Yeah,
it's just the best.
What a luxury!
That
sounds
just
so
great.
Good.
Yeah, exactly. Like this. But anyway, I'll do a podcast and ruin it by having to do an interview in the middle of that now. Anyway, final question. Final question. It used to be advice for PhD students / postdocs, but I'm now a second year postdoc, so screw the PhD students.
Yeah.
This question is aging with me. So any advice for postdocs?
I think a lot of this would only be for, if you decide to do a postdoc, it is likely because you want to continue within academia. And so this is more towards that. But I think the one thing, I would say something similar also to PhD students, but also I think it's very relevant to podcasts, is essentially just to figure out where you want to be in a couple of years' time and work backwards. Look at the job descriptions and the job positions for the jobs that you want to get in a couple of years' time, and look at the requirements. If you start looking for jobs and then you see, oh, wow, I should really have a skill set in this particular thing, you can't just have that skill set within the 2 weeks or the month before the job deadline. Thinking about these things, like academia is like a big ship that just takes a while to navigate. If you want to go to that direction, you have to start turning a lot earlier than when the actual thing comes towards you. So seeing what those requirements are and getting those skill sets there. Of course, there's so much luck involved as well. So many times when these positions come up, it is in a specific topic or specific research area, which often isn't yours. So I think having that knowledge in at least 2 different areas, I think is going to be better for your career, because then you're more likely to have a position come up which is within that particular area. Whereas if even you might be so good at what you do with that particular thing, but if there's no role there and that doesn't come up, you're kind of stuffed. But if you have 2 or 3 things under your belt where like, yep, you know what, I could say that I'm pretty strong in these particular areas, then at least that opens things up for you when it comes to academic positions there. But yeah, look forward, figure out where you want to be, and then work backwards from there.
Yeah, that's something I have to do more of. I think my PhD was very much, just do whatever I want. Okay, maybe let's also be a bit more strategic here. So yeah, I think that's also advice that I specifically needed to hear. Anyway, that was my final audio only episode. Thank you for joining me for that.
No, it's been a pleasure. Looking forward to the next chapter of the podcast, whatever it may be called.
Yeah. Whatever it might look like. Yeah. I'm very keen to very keen to see this. So I'll be there at launch, looking at the watching the first podcast. Okay. Thank you.